Welcome to the World History 1 review for Unit 10, which is the last unit for the course. So Unit 10 goes over trade, Japan, Africa, and the Renaissance. So there are a couple different things that are thrown into this unit, a couple quick things that we went over. The learning targets are not part of this video, but if you'd like to see them, you can always access them from your teacher. All right, so the first thing is there are a couple trading routes that you need to know in the Eastern Hemisphere. So remember, the Eastern Hemisphere would be Europe, Asia, Africa, Australia is down there. So not North America and South America. So one of the big trade routes was the Silk Road. It was an arrangement of overland trade routes from China to the Mediterranean Sea and back. All right, second group of trade routes is maritime trade routes in the Indian Ocean. So maritime, that word, means over water and sailing. Then there are the trans-Saharan trade routes that went across North Africa. Then Northern Europe traded a lot as it was linked down to the Black Sea, which is in the southeast corner. And then Western Europe relied on sea and river trade. That's how they did all of their trading. They didn't do as much overland trading. They relied on the seas that were around, with the Mediterranean being the biggest one, and they relied on the various rivers that ran through Europe. So let's take a look at a few of the trade routes. Here's the Silk Road. All right, as I said, it starts in China, and it goes to the Mediterranean Sea, as you see on this red line, and back. And the second one is the Indian Ocean maritime trade. So you have the Indian Ocean here, this big body of water, and from India, which is in the center of it all, you can sail to various places. You can sail over to the Arabian Peninsula, you can sail over to the east coast of Africa, Southeast Asia, or you can go through this group of islands here and come all the way around to the eastern side of China. All right, so the third group was the gold salt trade. Okay, so that was across the Saharan Desert. That's where the trans-Saharan trade comes from, across the Saharan. Okay, so the Western African kingdoms were the ones that relied very heavily on the gold salt trade. So the gold salt trade made sense because groups that needed salt were willing to trade gold for it because they had excess of gold, and they were willing to trade the groups that had excess of salt. All right, and the last map here is a map of European trade. So you have Northern Europe, which are the countries to the way north, Finland, Sweden, Norway. Okay, they used different trade routes, mostly rivers and seas, to get down to the Black Sea, which is over here. Remember, the Black Sea is located right above Constantinople, okay, and then to the northwest of the Mediterranean Sea. So what goods were traded along these routes? Okay, I've already mentioned you had gold that was traded from West Africa. Okay, it was traded across Sahara, and then it was traded to other groups around. And you had spices that were coming from the lands around the Indian Ocean. Then you had textiles coming from India, China, the Middle East, and later Europe. As they begin trading, they eventually start making their own textiles. Then you have porcelain, which you may have seen before. It's a type of glass, type of ceramic material that's coming from China and Persia. And then something else would be amber, okay? It's coming from the Baltic region, which is Northern Europe. Okay, so that's what's important to know from Northern Europe. Not only were goods traded along these routes, but a lot of technology was exchanged. You have paper coming from China through the Muslim world to Byzantium and into Western Europe. You have new crops are coming from India. Some of them would be crops that are used to make sugar, and technology that goes along with the making of sugar. Then you have water wheels and windmills coming from the Middle East. And then you have two important developments in navigation that are being traded. You have the compass, which comes from China, and you have the lateen sail, which comes from the Indian Ocean region. All right, and as always, as people are getting together, they're trading, they're talking, you have ideas that are being exchanged. So, as I mentioned, China had developed paper, so they began printing and creating paper money. So this is our money. Our money's on paper. So instead of using heavy metal coins, they now have lightweight paper money. Then, common idea that is always exchanged would be religion. You have Buddhism coming from China after it came from India, into Korea, and then down into Japan. Okay, then Hinduism and Buddhism also went from India to Southeast Asia, and Islam is spreading into West Africa and then Central and Southeast Asia. All right, so that's what we have for trade. Now we're moving on to Japan. All right, so important things to know about Japan is that it's a mountainous archipelago. Okay, an archipelago is a group of islands. There's thousands of islands that make up the Japanese archipelago, but really they only have 4 main islands that you see here. Then the Sea of Japan, or the East Sea, is between Japan and the Asian mainland. So all they have to do is sail across the sea, and they're very close to China and Korea. As I just said, Japan is very close to China in terms of geography. So because of this, China has a huge influence on their development. So ways that China influences Japan's development would be in terms of their writing system, their architecture, and the spread of Buddhism. Okay, so if you remember back to Unit 2 or Unit 3, Buddhism started in India and then was spread into China through missionaries. China then spreads it into Japan. Something from Japan that is unique to Japan would be Shinto or Shintoism. Shinto is the ethnic religion that is, as I said, unique to Japan. What it means is way of the gods. Okay, in Shinto, they focus on the importance of natural features, forces of nature, and ancestors. Okay, this shows their connection to Taoism and Confucianism, which came from China. Okay, the ancestors were a huge part in Confucianism, and the forces of nature were a huge part in Taoism. Shinto develops and later becomes the state religion of Japan. And as part of that, the Emperor of Japan is worshipped as part of Shinto. Something else to remember about Shinto is that it shows influence with Buddhism, and it's not that they fought for control, it coexisted with Buddhism in Japan. All right, so next up is Africa. So there's a few different areas of Africa that you need to know. First would be Axum. Their location is relative to the Ethiopian highlands and the Nile River. Okay, so Axum is East Africa. All right, so you see they're over here. Okay, the eastern edge of Africa, close to the Red Sea, at the southern portion of the Nile. What's super important about them is they were the first African kingdom to become Christian. Okay, the reason they became Christian is because of their proximity to Rome. Okay, you can't see Rome on this map, but you see the Mediterranean Sea, and you know that Rome is in the Mediterranean area. All right, so the next group was Zimbabwe. Their location was relative to Zambezi and Limpopo rivers and to the Indian Ocean coast. Okay, so they exist, as you see down here. This is the southern end of Africa. So you see South Africa at the bottom, which is the very tip of Africa. They're close to South Africa, and they're also close to the Indian Ocean. For them, they developed a great capital called City of Great Zimbabwe. It was the capital of their prosperous empire. Okay, so I just showed you the group from the east and the group from the south. Now we have the groups from the west. Okay, Ghana, Mali, and Songhai were the empires located along the Niger River and in the Sahara Desert in Western Africa. Okay, only one group existed at a time, and they existed in alphabetical order: Ghana, Mali, Songhai. They relied on trade of gold and salt across the Saharan Desert, so they were the trans-Saharan traders. They set up a city named Timbuktu that became a Muslim center of trade and learning. Okay, you see a picture of it here. You see people trading. All right, so moving on to the Renaissance, which is the last part of this unit. All right, so there's a few economic concepts that relate to the Renaissance. So first, if you remember, the Crusades had a huge part here. So people went to Jerusalem, which is located in the Middle East, to fight. While they're there, they began being exposed to various Middle Eastern products. They like these products, so when they go back to Europe, they want more of them. So this stimulates the production of goods and the increase in demand for these products. as it stimulates the production of goods to trade for the products that they want. Okay? The Crusades also encouraged the use of credit and banking. Okay? So credit, much like you might hear of it today, means borrowing money to spend now and pay later. Okay? Other economic concepts of the Renaissance. The Catholic Church ruled against the practice of usury and the practice of charging interest on borrowed money. Okay? Then letters of credit began being used to expand the supply of money and expedite or speed up trade. So people would offer these letters of credit, which is offering money, buy now, pay later. Okay, and then during the Renaissance, they began new accounting and bookkeeping techniques that were using Arabic numerals. Okay, Arabic numerals are the numbers we use today. Right, so the Renaissance began in the northern Italian city-states. The main northern Italian city-states were Florence, Venice, and Genoa. They were important because they had access to trade routes that connected Europe from the Middle East, okay, because of their location right on the Mediterranean. They served as trading centers for the distribution of goods to northern Europe. Okay, so goods can come from the Middle East, sail across the Mediterranean, go to these northern city-states, and then disperse out to northern Europe. Right, initially, they were independent city-states that were governed as republics. Okay, so unlike the nations that we talked about in Unit 9, Italy was not a united nation-state yet. Right, so something important that comes from the Renaissance would be the Prince. Okay, it was written by a man named Niccolò Machiavelli. He was an Italian writer, patriot, poet, and historian. Okay, The Prince was an early modern treatise on government. Okay, it was his thoughts on how government should be run. He supported absolute power of the ruler, meaning the king or queen has all the power. They make all the decisions. No one challenges them. He maintains that the end justifies the means. And he advises that one should not only do good if possible, but if it's necessary, one should do evil. All right, so also in the Renaissance was a big period of rebirth in art. Okay, so medieval art and literature focused on the church and salvation. That's what the previous 1,000 years had focused on. Now with this rebirth in the Renaissance, art and literature began focusing on individuals and worldly matters, along with Christianity. So Renaissance art focused on what's called humanism. Humanism celebrated the individual. It stimulated the study of classical Greek and Roman literature and culture, and it was supported by wealthy patrons. Okay, so people that were now making money were looking for new ways of spending it. They began spending it by giving money to artists to do more work, create more things. All right, so a few people from the Renaissance that you need to know. You have Leonardo da Vinci. Okay, he was an Italian painter, sculptor, inventor, really did it all. He painted the Mona Lisa, which you see down here, and he painted the Last Supper. Okay, then you have Michelangelo, who's another Italian painter, sculptor, really did it all. All right, he painted the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, and he created the statue of David, which you see here. And the last guy is Petrarch, who you see right here in the right corner. All right, he was an Italian poet and one of the most influential humanists of the time. He wrote the Italian sonnet, which was a 14-line poem broken into a group of 8 and a group of 6, each with their own rhyming scheme. All right, to wrap up here, we have the Northern Renaissance. All right, so growing wealth in Northern Europe supported Renaissance ideas. Renaissance ideas are in Italy. The 3 guys I just showed you were Italian. Okay, but now it's spreading north. The Northern Renaissance was a little different as the thinkers merged humanist ideas more with Christianity than the people in Italy did. Something big that came about at this time was the movable type printing press, and that enabled the production of and sale of books, which helped disseminate or get ideas out there. The movable type printing press comes from Gutenberg. Okay, the fact that there's now a movable type printing press where books can be mass produced rather than people having to handwrite them means that ideas can get to the north quicker. Okay, so the Northern Renaissance artists portrayed religious and secular, or worldly, that's what secular means, worldly subjects. So two important people that you need to know from the Northern Renaissance are Erasmus, who's down here. He wrote The Praise and Folly, which criticized the Catholic Church. And then you have Sir Thomas More over here, who wrote Utopia. Utopia is a model for a better society.